So I have a confession. I feel a little badly. I'm hoping that when you leave today, you see somebody from church who's not here today, and you say, of all the weeks you picked to miss church, this was like the most phenomenal Sunday we've ever had. Is that bad? I don't think it's bad, because I think we're going to have a great morning this morning. I really do. I think the Lord showed up first service, wants to show up again and do some good things in all of our hearts. How many of you are up for God doing a good thing in your heart, huh? Amen. Well, today we're going to, as Austin said, wrap up this mini-series we're doing in the month of May. I've titled it The Unlikelies, and I'll tell you why we did that in just a minute. But before that, I want to share my hope with you, what I hope this series accomplishes. And that is, I hope that as we've looked at these various characters, that all of us see how important it is that we personally be involved in serving the Lord, fulfilling his mission, being a part of the building of his church and the advancement of his kingdom here on this earth. Now, when I talk about the importance of serving, I'm not just talking about finding a task. Find a job and go do that job. It's important that we do that, and I think God has gifted us for specific tasks and specific missions, but I'm talking about a lifestyle. I think that what God wants for all of us is to understand that our lives are to be seen as giving service, serving, whenever we have opportunity throughout the course of each and every day. You know, when we pray, and I'm sure everyone in this room has prayed this prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You ever prayed that prayer? What you're saying, in essence, if you pray that and really mean it, is, Lord, use me. Here I am, use me. Because God's kingdom coming, God's will being done on the earth, does not just happen in this vacuum where God from heaven just goes, poof, there's my will. God chooses to use you and me to be a part of the process of bringing his kingdom, advancing his kingdom, building his church, whatever you want to call it, okay? We're focused on service also because in the vision that God gave me years ago for what needs to be the priorities of not only our church, but of healthy Christian people, I feel like the Lord gave me these 6 areas that we're to focus upon. Discipleship at the top, growing in our faith and helping others grow in theirs. Empowerment, meaning we're not just trying to build a church or advance the kingdom in our own strength or cleverness. Or how many of you ever found that doesn't work at all? Huh? It doesn't. It wasn't ever meant to. We need to understand how to walk in the power of God so he uses us and flows through us to do the things he wants to do. Service is the S, and that's what we've been talking about in this little mini-series. Again, whether it's serving inside the church, serving outside in the community, it's bigger than just finding those tasks and doing them when God calls us. It's understanding that our life is to be lived as servants wherever God gives opportunity. The I is intimacy. Austin and I tag teamed in February and March talking about probably the 2 most important components of intimacy, and that's talking about our vertical relationship with God. We spent those months talking about prayer and worship. I think those are the 2 important components, most important components when we talk about developing intimacy with God. The relationship piece is the horizontal relationships we have with each other, and how important it is to be people who are connected to other people and living life together, walking out this Christian faith, not on this little isolated island, but in the context of relationship with other people, because there's great benefit both to give and to receive. And then finally, evangelism, kind of bringing the star full circle. Okay, see, I told you it'd be worth coming today. Go home and tell everybody, you won't believe what he just said. No, full circle. That the good news that saved us is not supposed to be kept to us, is it? We're to share that with others so that they might experience the wonderful, forgiving, saving grace of Jesus. It's not just for us. So to live out those areas is to live a balanced, healthy, well-rounded Christian life. I want you to understand, when I'm talking about this, it's not more to do. Doesn't everybody here have enough to do? It's not throw one more thing on your plate. No, it's not that at all. It's understanding that God has called us to live with this attitude of serving and allowing him to be the one to impact and affect our priorities so that we have the time we need to do the things he's called us to do. I want you to see serving not just as more to do, more on your plate, another job, but it's an adventure. It's an opportunity to fulfill your destiny. Now that sounds like, oh, that's kind of loaded. Do you really mean that, Kent? I really do mean that. Because we're put here on this earth, I think, for two primary reasons. One is to know and love God, have a relationship with him, right? But the other one is to use those unique special gifts that he's given to you to do those things that he's called you to do. If this were just about loving and knowing God, then I think it would make perfect sense that the minute you became a Christian, you ought to just go right to heaven. No reason to hang around here, would there be? No. But we're called. We're uniquely crafted and gifted to partner with God, to join him in this adventure of advancing his kingdom, building his church. You see, in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, it says, we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we could walk in them. God has uniquely gifted you, crafted you, made you to be able to do things that only you can do. I love in the New Living Translation, it says we're his masterpiece. Nobody was created just to sit on the shelf. Everybody has purpose and meaning and service, ministry they're called to do. Sadly, some people, though, kind of live like they are just on the shelf. Not to be admired, but they don't see value. They don't see their purpose. They don't understand how God has wired and shaped them and called them and given them skills to do certain things that really only they are called to do. We called this series The Unlikelies for a couple of reasons. First was, it's very unlikely that you ever heard a full sermon about the characters that we've been talking about this month, okay? We talked about Simon of Cyrene, the guy who helped Jesus carry his cross to Golgotha. We talked about the guy who owned the donkey and the colt that Jesus rode into Jerusalem in what we call his triumphal entry. We talked about the guy with the spare upper room that was used for the Last Supper. And we talked about how every one of those things seemed kind of small and little on the front end, but they were such a vital part of a bigger story. We talked about how it just seemed unlikely that, why would God use him and him and him? But each of them played a part in the unfolding of the story of salvation. The three characters we've talked about so far all played a part in Holy Week, when God's plan of salvation was fully launched, so to speak. But I want you to understand something. While the work necessary for salvation was completed by Jesus in his death, burial, and resurrection, that work of salvation is ongoing, isn't it? And it's going to be ongoing until Jesus comes again. And until he comes again, we all have a part to play in that story unfolding. Not just in our lives, but also in the lives of other people. I think, though, 95%, and I think that's probably an underestimate, 95% of the people, even in this room today, feel like I'm kind of unlikely. I mean, the gifts I have, the skills God's given me, the talents, they're not that important. I mean, they don't do a whole lot. They don't contribute a whole lot to the kingdom of God and its advancement. I think that's a wrong attitude, because anything that God would call you and I to do, by the very fact that God would call us to do it and would gift us to do it, makes it important, doesn't it? I mean, God doesn't ever waste his time doing trivial little dumb things. Everything has a purpose and a plan and a reason to fulfill his ultimate purposes and plans and reasons. And so to be included in that, to discover, what's God calling me to? How am I to serve? How am I to see my life as given in service to him and to people? And what are the specific things he's called me to do is probably it's as valuable a thing as you could ever do. It's a very worthwhile endeavor. But you see, I think most of the time while we just go, it's just me, I don't have that much to offer, it's not that important, is because we measure importance by the size of the task or the size of the ministry. And so we sit there and we think, well, look what he did. Wow. Look at me. That's why, remember the very first week of this series, if you were here, I asked you, I said, write down or think of people in your generation that God is using. And most everybody put down the big name people. Only one person in the whole crowd that morning wrote their own name down. I don't think it's because God's not using anybody. I think it's because we have this view that says, well, it's compared to him or her or that, or it's not that big a deal. And again, it is a big deal. If God has called you to serve, called you to do something, called you to use your gifts, talents, skills for his glory to advance his kingdom and build his church, then it's important. And we have to see it that way, okay? Anything God calls you to do, by the sheer fact that it's him that calls you and has gifted you to do it, makes it important. Now, the size of the task is a factor. I'm not saying that. But it's never the main issue from God's perspective. And we have to start thinking differently, okay? The main issues with God are not how big this thing is that he's called you or me to. The main issue is being faithful to whatever it is he's called you to do. Well done, good and faithful servant. Not, wow, aren't you important? Those words aren't going to matter. It's about faithfulness to what God's called you to do. It's about having the right attitude in doing it, so that we never go, oh yeah, I just do this little thing, and what difference does it make? No, it's saying, God, thank you for calling me to this. And even if it might look small, even if, well, I just work in the nursery every week, that's no small thing. Like Austin said, you're shaping, developing the leadership of the church for the future. That's a big deal, not a little deal. And then having excellence in everything that you do. Be faithful, have a good attitude, and do it with excellence. In other words, don't ever say, well, all I do is, or it's only, or it's just. No, you don't have any idea the difference you might be making in another person's life. So take it seriously, do it with excellence, have a good attitude, and be faithful. All right. So today's unlikely person is probably somebody you would never think of as being unlikely. So I want to help you guess who it is, okay? We're going to have a little fun this morning. You ever watch Wheel of Fortune on television? They start the show now with the toss-up round, and they just start putting letters up, and the first person to guess who it is wins a big prize. Well, guess what? The first person who guesses today isn't winning anything. You will just have the satisfaction of, wow, I was the first person to guess who it is. So, let's start, and as you think you know who it is, shout it out. Who said it? King David is right. Congratulations, you're smarter than everybody else in the room. Now, some of you are probably sitting here saying, well, I would have said King David, but he's not unlikely. Pastor Kent, he's the most famous king in the history of Israel. There's more about him in the Bible, either about him or that he wrote, than just almost anybody else in the whole book. How is he unlikely? Well, it's a mistake also that we make, a wrong perspective that we so easily take, in that a lot of times we determine unlikely after the fact. And we look at what somebody winds up doing and assuming, well, they're not unlikely. They're the most likely candidate in the world. Look what they did. And I want you to know something. That's a backwards perspective, okay? My contention is that King David, at least at the start of his story, is probably more unlikely than the other three guys we already talked about. Now, the word unlikely isn't actually used in David's story when we first meet him in the story, but I'm telling you, it's exactly the way that his family treated him and saw him. So I want to take you to 1 Samuel chapter 16, just in terms of background information. Saul was the first king of Israel, okay? And to suffice it to say, that didn't work out so well, okay? Saul had a real issue with disobedience to God and what God called him, asked him, told him to do. So it was time for Saul to be replaced. It was time for a change. So we're going to pick the story up at 1 Samuel 16, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Samuel, "You've mourned long enough for Saul. I've rejected him as king of Israel. So fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man called Jesse who lives there, for I've selected one of his sons to be my king." But Samuel asked, "How can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." "Take a heifer with you," the Lord replied, "and say that you've come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which of his sons to anoint for me." So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. What's wrong?" they asked. "Have you come in peace?" You see, you got to understand what was going on there. In chapter 15, God told Saul that he needed to kill King Agag, one of their great enemies. And Saul didn't do it. Typical of Saul, he just, I thought maybe instead I would. And so Samuel had to be the one to go and kill this guy. Word got out, and so when Samuel shows up in town, it's like, "Hey, are we okay? Just kind of heard what you did, and you come in peace, okay, right?" And so Samuel assured them that, but that's what that's all about. "Yes," Samuel replied, "I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, "Surely this is the Lord's anointed." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "This is not the one the Lord has chosen." Next, Jesse summoned Shema, but Samuel said, "Neither is this the one the Lord has chosen." In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Then Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" "Well, they're still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he's out in the field watching the sheep." Without saying the word, Jesse is saying, "Well, yeah, I have another boy, but he's not that important. He's a low man on the totem pole, okay? He's not really important. He's sort of an afterthought, okay? We just have him out there watching the sheep." In other words, yeah, I have another son, but it's really unlikely that he's the one you really want. And yet, "Send for him at once," Samuel said. "We will not sit down to eat until he arrives." So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes, and the Lord said, "This is the one. Anoint him." So as David stood there among his brothers, Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought and anointed David with the oil. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. Church, the story, this and what follows, is just so loaded with principles and things that we really need to remember or to learn about the calling of God on our lives. And so I just want to share a couple of those with you today, okay? The first one is this. David clearly knew his calling to be king from this encounter that he had with Samuel, all right? And with the Holy Spirit, by the way. But there was not an instant ascension to the throne. It wasn't, "You're anointed, you're king, boom, go sit on the throne right now." And David did not just sit around waiting for his coronation. There was no attitude in him that's like, "Hey, I'm the next big dog. I'm just going to go sit over here. And when you're ready, you call me because I'm ready. I'm ready to be the king." You don't see any of that kind of attitude in him whatsoever. No, instead you see this. David continued to faithfully serve in those places that God had already placed him, in the opportunities that God had already set before him. Right after this amazing encounter with Samuel in the Holy Spirit, 1 Samuel 16 goes on to tell this little story. apparently because of Saul's disobedience, the Lord sent an evil spirit to afflict him because of his disobedience to the Lord. And they realized that they needed to find somebody who was a skilled musician who could play. Whenever this spirit came to torment Saul, this person would come and play, and the spirit would lift. It would kind of go off of him. And so they discovered that David was such a person. And so it says in 1 Samuel 16:19, so Saul sent messengers to Jesse to say, send me your son David. And what's he called? The shepherd. You see, it's not David sitting around just biding his time until he's king. He's still who? He's still the shepherd. He's still doing what his father had tasked him to do. Jesse responded by sending David to Saul along with a young goat, a donkey loaded with bread, and a wineskin full of wine. So David went to Saul and began serving him. Saul loved David very much, and David became his armor bearer. David could have had this attitude that says, when are you going to get out of the way, buddy? I'm the next king. No, you don't see any of that. His father still asked him to tend the sheep. What did he do? Tended the sheep. He was called to minister to the man he was going to replace. What did he do? He ministered to him, and Saul loved him. David's still out faithfully serving his dad in this lowly position, and there were few positions lowlier than shepherding sheep. And again, no bad attitude. No, I'm going to be the king kind of mentality going on in him. And David continued. This isn't just a one-time instance. David continued to help his father with the sheep, even after he's called to minister to Saul, which, by the way, would have been a little bit of a promotion. Shepherd, king's right-hand guy. He doesn't make that kind of distinction or qualification. It says in chapter 17, verse 14, David was the youngest son. David's 3 older brothers stayed with Saul's army. In other words, the 3 oldest boys went out to the battlefield. This is where the Goliath story happened. But David went back and forth so he could help his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. There was something for David to do. There was something he was called to do. And so he didn't put any kind of quantifiers or qualifiers on this and say, no, I want to do this. No, this is what God asked him to do. That's what he was going to do. So, whether you believe God has called you to something big, or know he's called you to something big, or I know it's not what I'm doing now, it's something different. Even if you know your future calling, or you don't know your future calling, you just know what you're doing now isn't it, stay faithful to where God has you until God places you or moves you somewhere else. Pastor Ken, I just don't know what my calling is. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've had people say to me, I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I just don't know what I'm called to. You know what the answer to that is? Whatever it is you're doing now, keep doing it until God calls you to something else. Keep doing it, and do it faithfully, and do it with a good attitude, and do it with excellence. Step into other opportunities God may give you along the way, but don't just quit something because, well, I don't like that. Sorry, bad attitude. Be faithful right where you are as long as God has you there, because that's God's will for you until he changes the directions, the orders, the marching orders. So, you think about this story and it's like, well, why would God choose David? And the other question is, why would he keep him tending sheep so long? Do you ever wonder about that? I mean, anointed to be king, and there's a good period of time before he actually becomes the king. He spends a lot of time tending the sheep. Why? Well, there's a little portion of scripture in the 78th Psalm that gives us a ton of revelation about what God was up to by keeping David faithful in this place that we find him at the beginning of the story. It's Psalm 78, verses 70 through 72. It says there, and it's talking about God, he also chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds, from the care of the ewes with suckling lambs. He brought him to shepherd Jacob his people and Israel his inheritance. So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them with his skillful hands. You see, God saw something in David when he was out there doing this lowly, menial task of watching his father's sheep. And it was in that time that David learned two amazing things. First of all, he learned integrity, but it was in this place where he learned skill. And you see, sometimes we look at what God has called us to or somebody else to, and we just want to go, well, that's no biggie. But no matter what it is God has called you to, he's always in that calling trying to develop at least two things in you: skill and heart, integrity, character, whatever you want to call it. You see, David's out in this field, and while he's not all alone, there's a few other servants of the family that are out there helping him. There's no boss watching him because he's kind of the boss out there in the middle of nowhere. And yet David still did his job faithfully. Because integrity is not about how do you behave when somebody's watching you, somebody important, somebody in authority is watching you. Integrity is about being the same person whether somebody's watching or nobody's watching. Because guess what? God's always watching. Right? And so you don't measure the task as being important or big or significant. Whatever it is, you do it faithfully, with integrity. And I think God saw David and also understood and realized this. As you faithfully care for these little lambs and these sheep for your father out in the middle of nowhere, I can see into your heart, David, and I know that you're going to do the same thing with and for my people when you become the king. Because how you treat the sheep, those lowly animals, is going to be how you treat my people, my most important prized possession. Jesus said in Luke 16:10, if you're faithful in little things, you're going to be faithful in big things. Now, do not for 1 minute think in your mind, oh, so wait a minute, if I can be faithful in this little gig God's given me, maybe I'm going to get to do something big. Maybe I'm going to get a nice promotion. There's no sense of promise in that being the case, okay? And that can't be the hook that grabs your heart. So if I do this, then I'm going to get that. Maybe, but that's not the promise in this, okay? Because I think the opposite is also true. If you're not faithful in little things, you're not going to be faithful in big things. And so I know too many people who have had this attitude. You know, what I'm doing now, it's not that important, but if I ever get to do something important, I'll really do it well. And I'll have integrity then. And God looks at us and says, listen, if you won't have integrity now, guess what? You're not going to have integrity then. Now is the time to develop faithfulness, amen? Wherever it is God has you, now is the time. Now is the time to use and grow your skills in that thing God calls you to. But most important, develop integrity. Character, heart is the most important thing. It's not a pick one or the other. Is it about skills or is it about integrity? It's about both. But always pick integrity if you had to pick between the two. Make that your focus. Make that your priority. You see, it was out there in the middle of nowhere with those sheep that David learned how to care and how to fight. But most importantly, it was out there when nobody was there except him and God alone that he developed his intimacy, his relationship with God. That's where his faith and trust was built. Jesus said in John 8:47, he who is of God hears the words of God. And that word for words is rhema. It's not talking about here's the Bible. It's here's the voice of God. And it's, church, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not just about serving and where you serve and serving with excellence. It's about cultivating, carving out into your life time to be alone with God, to learn to hear his voice, to let him build things into you that will make you more effective and prepared for whatever the serving in your life is going to look like. Even when David shows up to fight Goliath, and by the way, he didn't show up to fight Goliath. If you know the story, he showed up to take food his father sent to his brothers. So again, it's faithful serving. But he's there and he hears the story about this Goliath guy, and he does hear about the fact that there's going to be a reward for whoever kills Goliath, but that's not even the reason why he fought him. Again, it wasn't, oh, you mean I'll get something out of this if I do that? No, that's not his heart at all. But David looks like the most unlikely character when it comes to fighting Goliath as well. doesn't he? I mean, he's kind of this small little kid young man that shows up. This cracks me up. This is 1 Samuel 17. David shows up, hears about Goliath, and comes to Saul and says, hey, don't worry about this Philistine. I'll go fight him. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine. There's no way you can do that and possibly win. You're only a boy. And he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. Listen, I've been taking care. He didn't say listen, I did. Listen, I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after him with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and I club it to death. Can you just imagine Saul in this moment going, bears, lions, David, you what now? The unlikeliness of this kid being able to do that is amazing. But again, even in that insignificant thing, there's no wasted time. That's where he learned the skill necessary to fight Goliath. I've done both this to bears and lions. I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he's defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, and may the Lord be with you. That's a nice little thing to say. I'm convinced that in David's heart it was like, well, thanks, but the Lord's already with me. Because I learned his presence when I was doing something that nobody thought was important or significant or any other thing. Goliath himself confirms the fact that David is an unlikely opponent. David shows up out on this battlefield, and basically Saul takes one look at him and says, what, am I a dog that you send this little pipsqueak out here with sticks and stones? I bet he didn't say sticks and stones will break my bone, because he would have found out that, yeah, no kidding. Huh? But David replies to, again, this spoken over him, you are never going to beat me. You're so unlikely. David replied, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of the heavens' armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. Holy smokes. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole earth will know. Not that David is something, but the whole earth will know there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembles here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. Now here's the point of this, okay? You think about what Jesse spoke about David and what Goliath said to him and what Saul thought about him. Who are you going to listen to? When it comes to what you think and perceive about yourself being unlikely or unimportant or insignificant or whatever, who are you going to listen to? The world and what it says to you, or God and what he has to say about you? God is the one to listen to, because God is the one who both calls us and qualifies us for whatever it is he calls us to do. Think about this for a moment too. While there was only one literal Goliath, David faced a lot of Goliaths in his life. His father's opinion, his brother's opinion. I didn't share this one with you, but in chapter 17 also, David shows up. He's going to go fight Goliath. It says in verse 28, when David's oldest brother Eliab heard David talking to the men about Goliath, he was angry. What are you doing around here anyway? He demanded. What about, and this is such a put down, what about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. I love David's response. What have I done now? I was only asking a question. You see, David wasn't buried under his father's opinion or his brother's opinion or anybody else's opinion, because he had a reservoir within his heart and mind of what God thought about him from all that time out there seemingly doing this unimportant little task, taking care of sheep. Hearing God's call, hearing God's affirmation, learning the skills God was putting in him. understanding his calling and what that would look like. Do you have that? If you don't get anything else out of this message, don't even make it about serving. Make it about cultivating your relationship with God so you hear his voice. And then out of that will come a greater understanding of your calling and your giftedness and how God wants to use you in a really important, significant way to advance his kingdom. But you got to have that in you first. That's what it takes to fight off. Well, who do you think you are? You're nobody. You're not going to amount to anything. You can't do that. You're not qualified, etc., etc., etc. Defeat the Goliath of other people's opinions. David also fought the Goliath, quote unquote, of his sin, like with Bathsheba. Bad choices he made, like taking the census. I could go on and on and on. But David was chosen not because of the mistakes that he made, but because he was an overcomer. And in an overcomer, probably the best way to define that was this statement made about him. He was a man after God's own heart. He didn't let other people's opinion get in the way. He didn't even let the mistakes he made get in his way. That, for all of us, needs to be our number one foci. And you know I love that word. Because it's in cultivating that relationship and hearing God's voice, that's what matters most. That's what makes you most effective. That's what moves you from an unlikely, maybe not to a likely, but it moves you to the place where you can be effectively used. So I want to ask you a question as we wrap this up today. What are the things that you need to face, and what are the Goliaths in your life that you need to overcome so that God can use you like he wants to use you, so that you're prepared to serve in those unique ways that God has called you to? Is it a negative self-image? You just have way too much thought and things spoken over you from your family or friends or authority figures in your life that just cause you to see yourself as so unimportant, insignificant, you don't matter, you couldn't do it. Is that it? Is that part of it? You really need to overcome that negativity. Maybe it's sins, mistakes that you've made, or things that you're struggling with now that they're holding you back. They're keeping you from doing what God calls you to do because you're stuck in this thing. Listen, don't ever let your past or even your current circumstance, situation, determine where you're going to end up. And I think it's sad, way too many people let their past or where they're stuck right now keep them from moving forward in what God wants for them. Don't let that happen. I think there's a calling, an anointing on every follower of Jesus to do something unique and specific. First of all, the big understanding that we're all called to serve, but out of that servant's heart, there are specific things God's calling us all to. So seek the Lord. Number one, seek the Lord. Seek him for his Holy Spirit, his presence, his filling, whatever you want to call it. And then, as you cultivate that relationship and that presence of the Spirit, then out of that, you'll discover, what am I supposed to do right now? And where might God be taking me down the road? And again, seek calling, not position. If you happen to get a position, great. But you don't serve for position. That's human ambition. And frankly, I think the church, especially in America, is way too filled with human ambition right now. You do this and you'll get to be that. Even if somehow God calls you to a position, it's always a platform to serve others, not to be somebody. You understand that? That's as important as about anything I could say. So don't ever seek position, and if you ever get position, use it as a platform to serve. You know, unlikely may be true about you. It's true about me. I some days look in the mirror and can't imagine that I'm here doing this. I think I'm as unlikely as anybody. But even though that might be true about me or about you, don't ever let that feeling define or discourage or deter you from seeking God for everything and anything he wants to use you for, what he's called you to. Last thing I want to say before we pray. Part of the reason why I'm doing this series, why I did this series, was in response to a word I felt God spoke to me for our church for this year. The word was prepare. God has wanted us, called us to get ready, be ready for whatever 2019 and beyond might hold. Listen, more than anything, as a church, I want us to be ready to respond to whatever the chaos, crisis, and craziness in the world is going to bring. Because I think it's out of that many times that people understand and realize their desperate need for Jesus. And the church has got to be ready to respond to that. Amen? And so we got to be in that place, that mindset, that mode of, I'm here to serve. And out of that, I'm here to discover how God has wired me, what he's called me to, and I'm going to say yes to the opportunities he gives. That's what it means to be a healthy body. In 1 Corinthians 12, there's this analogy of the body, and when you read through that story, it's not going to be a PowerPoint slide, but every part of the body, when it's healthy, knows the part they're supposed to play. And they're satisfied with what God has called them to. And they don't sit comparing themselves and saying, well, I wish I was that because that's better than what I am. Or I'm not important because I don't do this or I don't do that. There's peace. They're satisfied. They understand what God has called them to and they're doing it. One verse out of that I want to read to you. In fact, some parts of the body that seem weakest and least important, unlikely, are actually the most necessary. That's part of why I did this series. I just want all of us to come to that revelation that I'm important. I'm important to God. He's got something for me to do that only I can do. Now, if you won't do it, he'll find somebody else who will do it. But why would you ever want anybody else to do what he's called you to do? Oh, never, never. So I want to just put this little cartoon up because I think it's a great picture of what's wrong sometimes. It's guys on a galley ship, and it says, I've got it too, Omar. A strange feeling like we're just going around in circles. And I think at times that's a picture of the church. The guys on the left are healthy. They know their gifts, they know their calling, and they're doing it with excellence and a great attitude and with all their might. And the guys on the right are just kind of spectators, never stepping into what God has called them to. So the guys on the left have to work twice as hard because the guys on the right aren't doing what God has called them to. And it causes the church to go around in circles. I'm tired of going around in circles, aren't you? Man, as Jesus calls us to be ready for whatever's coming, I want us to be healthy. I want us to be ready. The power of the gospel not only saves you from things, sin, separation from God, your past, and all that stuff, it also saves you for something. The gospel saves you for relationship with God, but also a unique ministry, serving his kingdom. And I want everybody in this place to find that. And so I want to pray as we close our time today. But I want you to know this. I'm going to lead us through a prayer, and I'm going to ask you to personalize this prayer as it's appropriate. But when we're done today, after we dismiss, there's going to be a group of folks up front here that I've specifically asked to be here prepared to pray for anybody who wants something a little more than just the general prayer we're going to do. If you're here today and something resonates in your heart that, man, I need some breakthrough. I am stuck in people's opinions of me. I'm stuck in sin. My past too impacts where I'm at and where I'm going. I just need help. Jesus, I want a breakthrough. I want to be that person that Pastor Kent says I am. And I need your Holy Spirit to come and break through, fill me. These folks are going to be down here. We're going to anoint you with oil and pray for you for that breakthrough. They'll ask you specifically what you need prayer for, and then we're going to pray. I don't know what God's going to do. I just felt very strongly that we needed to offer this time. So last thing I want to say before I pray, and we're going to pray, sing a song, dismiss, and then have that ministry time after we're done. Let me call your attention again. Please fill out a connection card if you haven't. Leave it on your seat or put it in the offering box in the back when you drop off your tithes and offerings in that box, okay? All right, let's pray. And again, personalize this prayer as it fits you, all right? Lord, I'm just asking on my behalf and all of our behalves that you come and heal us. Lord, we need a breakthrough when it comes to some of the negative assumptions we make about ourselves, the perceptions we have about ourselves, the lies we believed, whether it's from families or friends or other authority figures, whomever, those voices that grab our hearts and tell us we're not important, There's nothing really for us to do. We're not significant. It doesn't really matter. God, would you break those things out of our minds and hearts so that we can walk more fully into the calling that we have on our lives to serve? If we need deliverance from sin that's holding us back, or if mistakes in our past cause us to believe that we can't change, that there is no different, better future for us, Lord, break through those things. Give us victory over sin. Help us leave the mistakes in the past where they belong. Father, I'm just asking for everyone in this room that you'd speak to us, that you'd lead us and guide us into the places that you're calling us, and we'd have courage to step forward, that you'd remove fear and confusion from our hearts and minds. Bring clarity where we need it, Lord. For some of us, God, it's going to be choosing better priorities with our time, so we're free to do those things you call. Give us that strength as well. For those that are already serving in places where it's hard, where it's difficult, where it feels like, yeah, I can really relate to David. I feel like I'm out in the middle of nowhere doing this little small thing. Would you encourage their hearts today? Give them strength to continue to be faithful, to have integrity, to let you continue to sharpen their skills. Because, Lord, you've got a great plan and purpose for all of us. And my heart is that we understand it and we start walking in it more fully. So, Jesus, come and do a work by your Holy Spirit in all of our hearts today.